90% of the 2025 NECO Agricultural Science Practical Examination questions have been thoroughly answered in this video. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video lesson, I have analyzed the various specimens for the 2025 NECO Agricultural Science Practical Examination, and I've also answered likely questions that you see on the day of the examination. So do it to stick around. Get your writing materials, don't skip any aspect of this video, and watch this video to the end. Before we look at the various specimens, here are a few tips that will help you in the agricultural science practical examination. And the first is that the practical examination makes up about 35% of your total score in the agricultural science. And what does this mean? Passing the practical examination will give you an edge or an advantage in getting a good grade. Imagine getting 25 out of this 35% and then getting 25 from both your theory and your objective, which is feasible. This will give you up to 50, and with 50 you have passed the NECO Agricultural Science. Secondly, when you are asked for the scientific name of any organism, always ensure that the first name, which is called the genus, should start with a capital letter, and then the second name, which is the specific name or which is got from the species, should start with a capital letter, and thereafter you underline both of them separately. For example, we have Z maize here. The Z starts with a capital letter Z, and the M starts with small letter m, and then both of them are underlined separately. Thirdly, ensure that you do not paint or shade your diagrams. In agricultural science, just like biology, we are expected to draw. It is not fine art, so just draw to your own ability, but ensure that you do not paint your diagrams or shade your diagrams. Fourthly, ensure that you label your work appropriately. Though this is agricultural science and you will not really be told to draw much, unlike that of biology, but when you are told to draw, ensure you draw properly, don't shade or paint, and also label your work appropriately. And it is always emphasized that you label to one side. Probably all your labels should face the right, or they could point towards the left, or towards the up, or towards the down. But in all, whatever pattern you are following, just ensure you stick to that pattern. So if you are labeling everything to your right, just stick to that pattern. Then lastly, when you are asked to contrast, which is very important, always draw a table. Now what does contrast mean? Contrast simply means to find the difference. When you are told to contrast between two specimens, you are simply asking what is the difference between these two specimens. For that particular question, always draw a table. So on one side, place one of the specimens there, then on the other side, place the second specimen. Then you could be told to compare. Compare also means the similarities, but in that case, you do not have to draw a table. And when you are comparing, just use the word both. For example, A and B both have two legs, both have heads. So ensure you follow that pattern in answering your question. So here are the list of specimens for the 2025 NECO Agricultural Science Practical Examination. And Specimen A is the Burdizzo, Specimen B is a file, Specimen C is a manure drag, D is granite, E is the calcium carbonate, Specimen F is sieve, Specimen G is kolanut, then Specimen H is sweet potato, Specimen I is thick, Specimen J is a louse, and lastly Specimen K is a fresh meat. So we begin by looking at the first specimen, which is the Burdizzo. And in your exam, one of the common questions you'll be asked is to identify. Identify simply means what is the name of the specimen that is before you. So if a specimen is marked as A, that specimen is the Burdizzo. So when they tell you to identify, they are simply asking what is the name. So your answer to that question will be Burdizzo. Then the next likely question will be asked is to give a description of the specimen. Description simply means describe the appearance or the feature of that specimen you can see. So for the Burdizzo Specimen A, it is a plier-like in the sense that it has the shape of a plier and is a metallic instrument, just as you can see. Also, it has two handles, it has a turning point, just like a scissors, which is popularly called the fulcrum, and it has a sharp end, and it is used for castration without causing external bleeding. So some person might want to ask, what is castration? Castration is just simply removing the male gonad from a male livestock. So that's castration. So and what's that gonad? The testis. So when you remove the testis from an animal, you make or you render that animal to be infertile. So that's castration. So most times, why is castration done? It is done because we want these animals to grow bigger in size. Next question they will likely ask you, what are the uses? So the uses is to crush the spermatic cord. If you look at the picture on your left, you see what we call a crushed cord. So there's a cord that enters the testis. So we want to crush that cord. And secondly, it is used for bloodless castration. What's castration? I've talked about castration, removal of the male reproductive system or the male reproductive gonad to render the animal infertile, and we are doing that in a bloodless manner, in the sense that less blood is lost during the process. It's not like a process that leads to heavy bleeding. And thirdly, it is used to control breeding in hares. So what does this mean? If, for example, there's an animal that loves breeding a lot and we remove the testes, the urge for the animal to want to breed will reduce. So the last question they will definitely ask you is the maintenance of this specimen. So for the maintenance, how do you take care of it? Number one, you should always clean and sterilize it. So whenever you finish using it, clean it and sterilize it, because we don't want it to be infected when we want to use it for another animal. Secondly, store in a dry cool place, and also lastly, oil the metallic part. The whole reason is to prevent rust. Moving on, specimen B is the file. Again, they could ask you to identify specimen B. So your single answer rather will be a file. Then they will tell you to describe. So this specimen, how can you describe it? So simply, it's a metallic tool with a rough surface and also a blunt edge. The edge is not sharp like a knife or a cutlass. The edge is blunt and it is used for smoothing or sharpening farm tools. So if you have ever come across this specimen, you see most farmers, especially the subsequent farmers that don't have enough or mechanized tool, uses this particular specimen to sharp their cutlass most times when they are farming. So that's the description. So again, it's a metallic tool with a blunt edge and also a rough surface for smoothing or sharpening farm tools. So they could ask you to tell them the uses. For the uses, it will be used to sharpen farm tools, majorly cutlass, hoe and spade. Also, if there are rough edges, we can use to smoothen the rough edges, and also it used to just maintain the effectiveness of a cutting tool. So if there's a cutting tool, for example, there's a cutlass you have been using for like 7 years, at a point you find out that it's blunt, and if it is blunt you can't use it properly. So to make it to be effective, we can use a file. Again, they could ask you, what is the maintenance for this specimen? The first is that you clean after every use, because we don't want it to get dirty or rust. Also, store in a cool, dry place to avoid moisture, which can bring about rust. And also avoid dropping to prevent breakage, like just dropping it on the floor can make this specimen to break if not well taken care of. Moving on, our third specimen is a manure drag. So manure drag is just like a rake, which most of us might know. That's a rake that is used in a farm. But in this case, the end is longer. So why is it called a manure drag? It's called a manure drag because we use it to spread manure. We use to drag manure. So let's say there's a point, let's say from the starting of the farm, and you pour manure there. You can use this manure drag to drag or to distribute the material, or to distribute or spread manure across a farmland. So that's why it's called a manure drag. It's just like a rake, use it to move or to spread manure. So again, they could ask you to identify. Identify simply means what is the name. So the name of specimen C will definitely be a manure drag. So then they will ask you to describe. So to describe, for every farm tool, always start your description by saying it is a farm tool. a farming implement. As far it is agreed, when you are asked to describe, always start with this phrase, it is a farm tool, or that sentence, it is a farm tool or a farm implement. Then you can then add the other features you can see. So again, for this specimen, it's a farm tool or a farm implement which have a long metallic spikes or prong or teeth, which is used, and also it has a long handle. It can be a long wooden handle or a long metallic handle. So always describe this manure drag like that. So it has a long metallic spike or prong on teeth, any of them you choose to write, which is attached to a long wooden handle or metallic handle, depending on whatever you have on the day of your examination. And it's used for spreading manure evenly on the farm. So what are the uses? Again, it's used for distributing manure across the field. We can use it to break clods. What are clods? Clods are just like lumps of soil. So when soil clump, so there is soil lumps, we can use to break it and also mix the soil with manure. Also, we also use to ensure that the soil is uniformly fertile. So if a portion of the farm is fertile and one is not fertile, we can just use it to like rake the soil and ensure that fertility is distributed and it's uniform. Again, they will ask you to tell them the maintenance. So for the maintenance, you clean all those spikes or those prongs regularly. Then again, store in a cool, dry place or a covered place. And also for the metallic parts, it's important you grease them to prevent rust. So one common question they will ask you from specimen A, B, and C is that they will ask you what group of farm materials are they. So simply A, B, and C, they are all farm tools. So take note. So they are all farm tools. Moving on, they will definitely ask you to tell them the similarities between specimen A and B, specimen B and C, or specimen A and C. So now these are general similarities between A, B, and C. Number one, they are all farm tools. Number two, they have metallic parts or they are all made of metal. And lastly, they require maintenance to function well. Also, you could add that they are used on the farm for various farming purposes. So next, they could also tell you to tell them the difference between any of those three specimens, either between specimen A and B, specimen B and C, or A and C. So I gave you a general difference between the three of them. So number one is in terms of what they are used for. So for the Burdizzo, it is used for the castration of male livestock. For a file, it is used for sharpening and smoothing of tools. And then for the manure drag, the use is for distribution and mixing of manure in soil. So they can tell them the difference between Burdizzo and file. So you can tell them the difference in terms of the use of the instrument. Also in terms of their features or their appearance. So for that, for the Burdizzo, it's a plier-like metallic instrument with sharp cutting edge, as we have looked at earlier. Then for the file, it's a rectangular metallic tool with sharp or with rough surfaces rather. Then for the manure drag, it has a curved metallic prong with sharp ends, and it can have either a wooden or metallic handle. Again, this depends on what you are given on the day of your examination. Moving on to specimen D, which is the granite. Again, they could tell you to identify specimen D. Specimen D is the granite. So this first picture above is a granite rock. So when the rock is split, we would then have what we call, so when it's split, we then have what we call the granite stone. So we have the rock above and then we have the stones below. Again, they could tell you to identify. Identify simply means what is the name of the specimen. So your answer to that question should be granite, simply granite. Then for the description, they could tell you to describe. So when you are told to describe, a granite is simply hard. Obviously, these guys, they are hard, or these stones, they are hard. So they are hard. Coarse means rough. So they are rough, grained natural rock. Grain because when you touch them, you feel some sand particles, and you can use them in agriculture. So what are the uses now? Obviously, most times it is used for building houses for those persons that are quite familiar with building processes. So in the farm or in agriculture, we can use it for construction of farm structures like farmhouse and the rest. Also, we can use it for construction of road on the farms. And lastly, crushed gravels can be used, or this granite, when they are crushed into powder, or maybe not powder, but at least a form or that has a size greater than sand, we can be used for soil improvement, in the sense that if a soil, for example, I have a soil and the soil is too powdery, like it's too fine, I can mix it with crushed granite to make the soil better, so it is not too thick like clay and it's not too fine like dust particles. Next is one good question they could ask you. They could ask you, what type of rock is it gotten from, or what type of rock? So granite is an igneous rock, so it is gotten from the cooling of molten magma. So moving on, we have specimen E, and specimen E is calcium carbonate. So we should be familiar with this from our chemistry. So calcium carbonate, one of the first questions they will likely ask you is to identify. Identify simply means what is the name of specimen E. So your answer will simply be calcium carbonate. Then they will then move on to ask you to tell them the chemical formula for specimen E. It is CaCO3, that's calcium carbonate. So the element present, in case you are asked, are calcium, that is Ca, then C is carbon, then O is oxygen. Then they would continue to tell them the uses. For the uses, number one, it is used for liming. And what's liming? It is used to reduce soil acidity, because CaCO3 can act as a neutralizing agent to an acid. So when acid and a triazocarbonate react, they will form salt, water, and carbon dioxide. So in a way, it neutralizes an acidic soil. So that's the first use. Secondly, the calcium present in calcium carbonate can provide calcium for plant nutrition. So plants also need calcium for their growth. And thirdly, it can ensure or enhance microbial activity in soil. Then they will ask you to tell them the type of fertilizer. For calcium carbonate, it is an inorganic fertilizer because it is gotten from chemical elements which we have listed, which are calcium, carbon, and oxygen. So take note, it's an inorganic fertilizer. For organic fertilizer, we get them from dead and decaying living materials. But for this particular specimen, it's an inorganic fertilizer. Then they'll move on to, they can also ask you what are the method of fertilization application, meaning how do you apply fertilizers to a farmland. So the method which you ought to know, we have what called broadcasting. In broadcasting, you just like spray or spread the fertilizer uniformly. Then you have what called placement. So for placement, you place this, as the name implies, you place them at certain location. So from those points, they're able to dissolve or get into the soil and then reach the plant. So forms of placement are banding, drilling, and side dressing. Then we have foliar application. In foliar application, you use what you call a spray, like you spray it in a farmland. Then we have what we call fertigation, or better, as we all know, is what we call irrigation. So irrigation or in fertigation, you add the fertilizers to water that is running into the farm. So the water carries the fertilizer into the farm. So moving on, we have specimen F, and specimen F is a sieve. A sieve is similar to what we use in our homes for cooking. So but in this case, we are talking about the sieve in agriculture. Again, they could ask to identify specimen F. So your answer will simply be a sieve. Then they could tell you to describe. For a sieve, it is a metallic farm tool. It is round and it has a mesh at the bottom, or a screen-like tool, but better still, it has a mesh. And what we used to do, we use it to separate particles based on their sizes. So why do you say based on their sizes? For a sieve, smaller and fine particles that can pass through the mesh will pass through. Then the bigger ones are left behind. For example, if you look at this picture below, there are some particles that are left above because they cannot pass through this mesh. Then in your exam, they could ask you what are the uses. The uses again is to separate fine particles from coarse. Coarse means rough. So those fine particles can pass through, leaving behind the coarse particles or the bigger particles. Then we can also use it in soil texture analysis. So we want to know if the soil is rough, if the soil is smooth or fine, as the case may be. So if I place the soil on it and all the particles pass through, it means that that's a fine soil. The particles are so small, but if they don't, or if some pass through and some don't pass through, the soil is coarse or rough. Also, we can also use it in feed production to grade particles. Again, just like in the production of garri, if you have ever seen where garri is being produced, they use a sieve. What happens? The smaller particles will pass through, leaving behind the bigger particles. So if we can grade them, if we need the smaller particles, we use a sieve. The bigger particles, we use a sieve. So it just helps us to grade the feed for animals. Now moving on to specimen G, which is the Kolanut. So in this case, they will likely tell you to identify. So for specimen G, it is Kolanut, and most of us should be familiar with this specimen. And then the next question will tell you to write the scientific name or botanical name, as the case may be. So for Kolanut, the scientific name or botanical name is Kolanitida. Now, if you see how I wrote this thing, it is Kola, the C starts with the capital letter, underlined, and then the Nitida, the N starts with the capital letter, underlined. So in the exam, you should start the first name with a capital letter and the second name with a small letter. Never make the mistake of writing both with capital letter. And also, when you have done that correctly, underline each of them separately. Again, they could ask you what are the features. Number one, it is small in size and it has a smooth appearance. Also, you can go ahead to write it has a bitter taste seed with lobes in the sense that you can break this cola into smaller parts. So those are the lobes. Like they have on the cola, you can see some lines which you can also separate them. When you separate them, those parts you get are called lobes. Also, you can talk about the color. It has a brownish outer covering with either a pink or red inner surface, depending on what you have on the day of your examination. So if on the day of your examination you have the pink one, you can describe it that it has a pink outer covering. Then what are the uses? For the use, it is used as a stimulant. Some persons just chew Kolanut to stay awake. Secondly, it is used in traditional ceremonies. Obviously in Nigeria, that's one of the vital things that is used in traditional ceremonies. Thirdly, it is used as a source of caffeine and also for industrial purpose. Some persons use it to stay awake. Next, they could ask you to tell them the classification of this specimen, either based on lifespan. For lifespan, it is a perennial crop. And you know what perennial crops are? They are crops that can stay for more than 2 years. So they can live for more than 2 years. So it's a perennial crop. Besides, Kolanut comes from a tree, and we know trees are usually perennial crops. They could also ask you based on the agricultural use. So based on the agricultural use, Kolanut is a cash crop. Cash crop are those crops that are grown mainly for sale. So Kolanut is typically grown for sale. So the next specimen is a sweet potato. So for the sweet potato, again, they could tell you to identify. Identify simply means what is the name of the specimen that you can see. So the name of specimen H will be sweet potato. Next, they could move on to ask you to tell them the scientific name. And scientific name for potato is the Hypomia batatas. Again, first name should start with a capital letter and the second name with a small letter. And then they could ask you what are the features. So for the features, it has a rough skin and it has a tapering appearance. Tapering in the sense that if you look at a carrot narrows down. So that is what we call tapering. So it has a tapering skin with rough, please, not really a smooth skin. Then, depending on what you have, if it's orange in your exam, you can write orange. If it's yellow, or if it's white. So then they could ask you for the uses. I just added inner flesh, though you cannot really tell unless you cut it, but you can just tell. For example, in this first diagram, it has an orange outer flesh. In this second one, it has a pink or a red outer flesh. Then for the uses, it is a good source of carbohydrate. So it is taken as food to provide carbohydrate. Also, it can be used in production of flour and snacks like potato flour and potato snacks like potato chips. Also, for the farmers, it can serve as employment to them. Also, it can also serve as a source of income. Moving on, specimen I is a tick, and the first question they will likely ask you from this specimen is to identify. So again, For that question, to identify a specimen simply means what is the name of the specimen that is before you and that is labeled in either of A, B, C, D or down to K. So for specimen I, it is a tick. The next question they will likely ask you is the scientific name of specimen I. And scientific name for specimen I is the Buphilius species. Again, B is in capital letter or start with capital letter, and then S is in small letter, and each of them are underlined separately. Next, they could ask you to tell them the features. Features just simply means what you can see, the appearance of that specimen. Again, this specimen has an head, it has an abdomen, a large abdomen, it has 8 pairs of working legs, it has an hard skeleton, it has a piercing and sucking mouthpart. So those are the various features for this organism. And then they could move on to ask you the effect on livestock. We are talking about livestock because in agriculture, we are concerned with two things, plant and animals. We are not really talking about humans. So what are the effects it will have on livestock? Number one, they can suck up blood. Remember, they have a piercing and sucking mouth part. And also they are vectors of diseases like babesiosis and then the anaplasmosis. So they could transmit disease to farm animals. Also, if they keep staying on the skin of farm animals, they can cause skin irrigation or irritation rather, and then weight loss. Why weight loss? Because they are sucking blood from the livestock. Next, they could ask you to tell them the control method. How do we control this? The first is that we can use acaricides. And what are acaricides? Acaricides are just chemical substance that can kill mites and ticks. So we can use this chemical substance called acaricide to kill this specimen. Then rotational grazing. So in rotational grazing, just like I have two farms, A and B, and I take my farm animals to farm A to graze, that's to feed, and I notice that they had tick, so it is ideal for me not to take them to that farm, so I'll take them to a different farm to reduce that spread. So that's what we call rotational grazing. So if they keep feeding on a particular part or a particular farm, there's a high tendency that they could get this specimen. So you rotationally take this organism from one place to another, then handpick them, though it might not be really effective, but it is an answer in your examination. So in handpicking, you remove this tick from the body of the farm animals. Next is specimen J, and specimen J is a louse, which is the singular form, then the plural form is a lice. Next, they could ask to identify. Again, identify means what is the name. So your answer will be louse if it's singular, lice if it's plural. Next, they could ask you to tell them the scientific name. So scientific name for this animal is the Pediculus species. Then what are the features? Again, this organism has an head. Number one, presence of head. Number two, presence of a thorax. Number three, presence of an abdomen or even a large abdomen. Then there are 3 working legs. The presence of an antenna. Then it has a small wingless body. It has a flattened body with claws, and which is used to attach to the host. Then again, the effect on livestock, it can cause itching and restlessness, like the animal is itching and also not stay one place because this animal is a pest. Next, it can cause weight gain, so they can reduce weight gain, or in the sense we can say they can cause weight loss, and then productivity. Also, they can cause anemia, which is decrease in red blood cells in severe infestations rather. So these are the effects. So they share almost similar effect as that of the tick. Now, so what are the controls? We can use insecticides to control them. Also, can isolate and treat infected animals. If I know that an animal is infected, it is ideal I remove that animal from the other animals and treat it separate so that this louse does not spread to other organisms. Also, regular cleaning can also help in controlling this pest. So also they could ask you, because specimen I and J, they are similar guys because they are parasites. So they could ask you for the similarities and differences. So for the similarity, they are both ectoparasites. So what are ectoparasites? Ecto means outside. So they are parasite that stays on the body of their host or whatever they are attacking. So they are both ectoparasites. Also, they feed on the blood of livestock. That's why one of their effects is anemia. And lastly, they can cause skin irritation or skin itching, and also they will reduce productivity. So also they can ask to contrast. Again, I told you when you ask to contrast, it simply means draw a table. So to contrast between tick and louse, for tick, they belong to the class of Arachnida. That's where the spider also belong to. Therefore, louse, they belong to the insect class. So that's why I say they belong to the insecta. For tick, it has 8 legs. For louse, it has 6 legs. You can see it on the picture. Then for tick, they have a hard shell, while for louse, they have a flattened body. Then tick can transmit disease, like we said, the babesiosis and the anaplasmosis. But for louse, they just suck blood and then they cause itching and anemia. Lastly is Specimen Key. So they could ask you to identify. So when you are told to identify, it's best you write a fresh meat, because they clearly specified for your school to provide a fresh meat, not a cooked or a grilled meat. So you have to provide fresh meat. So your answer should be fresh meat and not just meat. Then for the source meat, where can you get it? You can get from livestock like goat, cow, or pig. Then what are the features? For the features, number one, you can tell them the appearance. It is red in appearance, soft, and also if there's a skin, you can just write with the presence of an attached skin. Secondly, it is moist with fibrous tissue and muscle bundles. Also, I've talked about the color, which is very important. You add to it. Next, they could ask you for the uses. So the use is that it's a good source of protein, so it is best used in human nutrition. Also, it can be used in food industries, probably where they produce canned meat, or they use it for producing other food products and delicacies. Also, it could provide income for the livestock rearers or the farmers, and also it can even be a good source of employment to those who are into livestock rearing. So the last question they will definitely ask you from this specimen is to tell them the method of preservation. Means how do we preserve it? Number one, we can preserve it by refrigeration. Secondly, freezing. So in refrigeration, we mostly use refrigeration for a short time preservation, and therefore freezing for a long time preservation. Then you could smoke, then dry, then salt or canning. So that brings us to the end of the specimen analysis for the 2025 NECO Agricultural Science Practical Examination. So viewers, thank you so much for watching this video, and also do it to click on the subscribe button just beneath this video to say thank you. And also, if you have questions, comments and suggestions, do it to leave them in the comment section of this video. And also, you can share this video lesson to your friend who are writing the 2025 NECO Agricultural Science Practical Examination. And also, if you are new to this channel or you haven't subscribed to this channel, do it to click on the subscribe button just beneath this video and then turn on the notification bell, so that whenever I release any educational video, you always get notified. So see you in my next video, and do have a wonderful time.